Good afternoon, everybody. My name is Craig Pumphrey. I look after marketing for Sabio, and welcome to our webinar entitled Uncovering the Value of the Customized Contact Center. We've got about a minute to go, and I'll do a quick intro of our panelists and team today. So, as I said, the event is supported around the topic of uncovering value around the customized contact center. We'll explain a little bit more about what that is. And I'd really like to thank Forrester, Loveholidays, and Twilio for supporting the event today. If during the webinar you've got any questions, you can use the question button on the app that you've entered the webinar on, and we will do our best to answer the questions asked. So first of all, a couple of introductions. You can see the guys on the screen, but I'd like to give a warm welcome to Art Schoeller from Forrester, Eugene, Neale from Loveholidays, David Cousins from Twilio, and my colleague Stuart Dorman, who is the Chief Innovation Officer for Sabio. So welcome, gents, and thank you very much for joining us. What I'd like to do is really now hand over to our headline act, Mr. Art Schoeller from Forrester. Art, over to you.
Craig, thanks so much for that introduction. And again, I want to express my appreciation to Sabio for sponsoring today's webinar. I'm really excited. We've got a number of panelists who've got great points of view and experience on this topic. And it's one that I'm pretty passionate about. You know, I've been in the industry now close to 35 years. You know, started back in the 80s with ways to integrate software and communication systems. And I've just watched this wonderful evolution to what's possible today. So again, thanks to the folks at Sabio. Let's dive in. Next chart, please. So if we look at the world of customer experience and customer experience leaders and organizations, you know, I want to kind of set the context here for our conversation as we go into this in more depth. Customer service organizations, certainly in today's world, there's plenty of competition, there's plenty of digital disruption, but at the end of the day, how do we win, retain, and serve customers? And, you know, it really comes down a lot of times to improving the experience. It's a little cut off in my chart there, but if we ask organizations what are their top priorities, you know, everyone certainly wants to grow revenue and make sure that we're also taking care of employees in this world of COVID pandemic. But, you know, coming in number two, as far as a high priority, a critical priority, 46% of organizations, you know, rank improving the experience of our customers as number two. So this is, you know, I find when we do these high-level priority surveys, you know, we end up talking to organizations and there's a lot of people saying, yes, this is what we want to do, but really it becomes tough in practice. And as Forrester has focused on CX and looking at the topic of customer obsession, and we rate companies in terms of their maturity on this, it really is a journey for many organizations to get there. And there's no question that at the core of customer service is not only the self-service capabilities, either through digital websites, now chatbots and voice bots, it's also what happens when customers interact with the agents in our contact centers. So next chart, please. Let's start drilling down into this concept of, you know, customizing our contact centers and what they do. Very high level diagram here. I am absolutely passionate that when I talk with Forrester customers who are either mid-size or very large organizations, you know, they're kind of wondering, well, where do we start? Where do we look at this? How do we improve the customer experience? And I always go back to this touchstone of journeys and journey mapping. What is that flow when a customer engages your brand? What touch point do they start that journey? What intent are they expressing, or what question do they want to get answers, or what product do they want to research? Or once they've engaged your organization, how do they use your products and services, and how do they renew or deepen their relationship? Well, you know, we got a little unhappy face down on the bottom of this chart here. looking at customer journeys, there's really two things to look at here. The happy face is when there's a really great frictionless flow for that customer to obtain information, to pose their question, to get responses. Where's my shipment? I am, for one of the companies that I work with, Disney, for example, when people are in the park and they're using the mobile application, how do I get questions or how do I make a reservation at the restaurant? We've got a happy face experience. But as we move along and, well, wait a minute, I can't get answers to my questions, and we want to connect, and not that it's always an unhappy transition to an agent. There may be unhappy hotspots just interacting with a chatbot or a voice bot. This creates friction and dissatisfaction. And there's no question that there are times when the technology itself can get in the way. Next chart, please. When you talk to organizations that really want to drive digital and digital transformation, it's really great to see that design teams, these CX teams, that are more and more getting involved with contact centers. It's kind of an interesting point in time in 2020 that when you look at firms that are really trying to innovate, think the ride sharing companies, Uber and Lyft and the many other ones around the globe, as they rolled out their mobile apps and disrupted the taxi cab business. What does that flow look like between the driver and the person requesting the ride? And if there's a need for a centralized support organization, what does that look like? Well, you got to do journey mapping. And so our survey of organizations as to where and what their design teams are doing, well, they do start out with journey mapping. But look at this, they next get to designing user experiences. And these design teams in the past have been looking at more classic business applications. What does that user experience look like on a phone? What does that user experience look like on a desktop? But now pointing towards customers, and what does that chatbot experience look like? And how does that flow look like as the customer's looking to get their question answered? And our contact centers are the next line of defense as all of those self-service options over multiple channels, in essence, I say, run out of gas. And it needs to be escalated to an agent. Our agents are really the front line these days to escalations. More typically, they're tier 2 because customers will have tried to self-serve first. So in our customer experience index, which Forrester has had in the market for now over a decade, and lands this customer experience in 17 countries, when you peel apart the CXI, there are 3 key drivers. When you look into it as far as what affects the CXI and rates organizations as far as top performers or low performers, but when you drill into the contact center part, that reps are able to answer questions, resolve customer problems quickly, and they have the authority to solve problems. Our contact center agents are consultants, problem solvers. They're no longer transactors where, just look something up for me. Well, people can do that on a website. So this experience design, this flow to agents is really a critical theme that in today's world of digital transformation and supporting our agents who can deliver on the brand promise, we sometimes have gaps in the technology, but there's also opportunities with how technology has evolved to facilitate a better flow. Next chart, please. Herein lies where we get to the concept of cloud and programmable contact centers, or customizable, whichever term we're using today. We are certainly in today's market full bore, full on moving our contact centers to cloud. Granted, contact centers have been slower to adopt software as a service type models. Contact center leaders tend to be more conservative. Hey, we want to upgrade the system. Well, let's wait for that. And there has to be the compelling event of the old system being old enough. But what's great about this survey done by NTT is that they ask companies, at what point, and after having adopted a cloud solution, not what people would anticipate, it's now that they've adopted a cloud solution for their contact center, What did you get? Improved flexibility, future-proof technology, improved uptime. But look at all of this. Improved our speed to market and easier customization. Now, these are very high numbers, ranging from 81% down to 69%, but this improved flexibility. Can organizations try an enhancement to the customer journey, a flow to the agent, contextual data, integrating more deeply with the mobile application? In the past, with on-premises software and the programming tools and techniques that we would use in those environments, hey, let's try something. Well, that's going to take 8 months, and it's going to cost this much, and a lot of regression testing. And so these design teams in a digital transformation world have been blocked by the older technologies. And so this agile methodology approach to tuning, tweaking, and working out the hotspots and customer journeys, well, let's not bother. No, never mind. That's going to take too long. And, this use case may not drive as big of a value. There's been this wall. There's been this blockade because of older technologies in the on-premises world. Today, even large organizations are migrating to contact center as a service. And so let's take a look at what that looks like and where customization starts to come into play. Next chart, please. So, this modern programming techniques, this agile flexibility certainly has an overlay as far as, this is the chart on COVID, what's happening during the pandemic, and everyone had to go send their agents home. Forrester has established a framework to help lead, and it's a little bit small on this chart here, customer service leaders, as far as the storming phase when people had to send their agents home in 48 hours, optimizing their work at home model, and then the new model as far as where we go once we start to emerge from it. Really, in essence, this customization and cloud technologies have facilitated a more seamless move to a work at home model. And as we anticipate hybrid models going forward, organizations, those that haven't done work at home, found out they could make it work. One customer that I spoke with, they've said that, Art, we have to now, we've been making COVID-like decisions. We need to learn how to do that once COVID is done. Meaning the customer service leaders get it, where they might not have been as agile in the past. They've learned a level of agility, and they're looking at technologies that help make them more agile and being able to do this going forward on a permanent basis. So next chart, please. Back to this idea of customization. We see out there a number of solutions available, contact center as a service, that have a broad range of out-of-the-box capabilities. And I don't want to drain the entire set of bullet points here, but delivery in a cloud software as a service platform, but also having the APIs available so that customization can be layered in on top of what comes out of the box from a contact center as a service. Reporting, IVR, CRM integrations. In some cases, some companies don't use a CRM for their desktop. A notable example here is we have Twilio on the line that has, done a number of implementations for state and local governments, at least here in the United States, that had to move pretty quickly and establish contact tracing teams. Well, had to move quickly. CRM systems don't really have a contact tracing module in them. We need to program that and get that out there pretty quickly. So this is an example where an agent desktop that needed to be built pretty rapidly to a number of specific requirements, but also seamlessly integrate with the contact flow being managed by the contact center as a service, is one example of programming and open APIs that can be done in a more agile fashion. Next chart, please. Let's get to this sort of concept of programming versus configuration versus out of the box. So I look at this on a spectrum, that what's available from a contact center as a service, and as you go through, and certainly these systems allow you to configure and be able to define a contact flow, maybe define a certain set of frames for the agent desktop, be able to sort of modify the reporting packages. Many customers still need, though, to extend a solution with partner applications that in a cloud-to-cloud environment are much more readily available and easy to do than a classic on-premises. But the axes here are what's important. As a software as a service upgrades, well, there's perhaps a bit of a risk to having that customization layer in on this platform. But the business value, going back to smoothing out those speed bumps in customer journeys and providing differentiated journeys, is where the customizations come into play. So I kind of say to customers, you got to answer yes to all three of these questions. Can you do something at lower cost? Do you have the programmers who can do this, who are reasonably knowledgeable and aware of contact center operations and environment? And will this provide a level of differentiation for what you do, both for your agent experience and your contact center operations and for the customer experience? I feel pretty passionate that, customers should be able to answer yes to all three as they anticipate, are they going to write code? And in some cases here, organizations like Sabio are layering in a low-code development platform on top of Twilio so that that customization is in an even higher level environment that makes it easier to do. So I just wanted to quickly set the stage here. Eugene, we're going to go to you next to get real-world experience from a hands-on customer who actually took advantage of this and did something on a programmable platform. So Craig, let's jump ahead to Eugene starts and give Eugene the microphone here.
Thank you, Art.
Thank you very much, Art. Over to you, Eugene.
Excuse me for smiling through parts of your presentation there. Just remember the days of having a large PDX on site and some of the pains of that. What a joy. If you could move on for me, Craig, to the next slide, that'd be a great place to start. So I'm going to take you on a little, very short tour of loveholidays, share our numbers with you, share some numbers about our contact center, just to give context. We're going to have a question answer session after this, and I want to make sure I touch on the topics I think are interesting. I'm not going to exhaust them for you because, as many people on this call know me quite well, I could probably talk until about 9 o'clock this evening if you let me. So loveholidays, only thing I'd really call out is we're a significant sized company. We sent 1 million people on holiday last year. We're the 4th biggest travel agent in the UK. Most people haven't heard of us because we're still growing. We intend to be much bigger. If you could move on for me, Craig. So our customer services team, I pulled the figures from last month. I didn't want to sort of cherry pick to find a nice example to give in a presentation. I just took last month because there it was. These are our exact numbers, rounded them up ever so slightly or down just to make them more presentable. The key things I would really call out is we have a significant number of agents, nearly 400. We have about 160 of those any active day. And to Art's point, engineers, only 3 of them. So we've managed to do everything we've got, all of the adventure we've got through so far, with just 3 in-house engineers. We've had some amazing support from some of our partners, Sabio included, but it is easy to do. I'd highlight it because I was quite scared of moving to a configurable contact center, but if we can do it with 3 in the environment we're in, I think almost anyone can access it. Something we could come back to in the Q&A section, but live chat, we all know the advantages of live chat. We've got multitasking agents, it's more higher efficiency. The bit that I've found in a configurable contact center and loveholidays have really benefited from is we can actually inject our data, pre-existing technologies into those live chats, driving up efficiency even higher than we're used to in the traditional contact center environment. If you could move on for me, Craig. I'm not going to go into these in any depth. I found them entertaining when we pulled them together. The bit that made me smile is the 4.5 years statement. That is active time that our agents spent in a chat last month. Just kind of shows the level of investment of time we're making into live chat. 4.5 years actively used. If you jump on for me, Craig, that'd be great. Okay, so this is more interesting slide, will take me a bit longer, but let me just recap. So you get the idea of Love Holidays. We're a reasonable sized company. We're growing fast and we have ambitions to grow a lot bigger. You get a little bit of the context of our contact center. By no means is it the biggest contact center out there or the busiest, but it's not a tiny contact center either. It's pretty busy. You can also imagine the imperative of people talking to us at the moment. We're talking about people's holidays, the kind of allegedly the best time of the year. COVID has maybe changed some of that a little bit. So people really need to get a reassurance from us at the moment. So onto this slide, I thought the other interesting bit to call out is this kind of, we used to call them incidents. I think Art said something very similar. They're actually, the world's shifted. We now need to do a lot of things that used to be considered exceptional, just as part of the norm. And our configurable contact centers helped us adapt to that. So this case up on the slides is about the 25th of July. Probably not a significant date for any of you, but for us in the travel industry, it was massive. That was the date that the government said anyone returning from holiday in Spain had to self-isolate for 14 days on return. Spain, I'm not able to give you the exact number because it's part of our trading secret, but Spain is the #1 tourist destination for British holidaymakers. So you can imagine these numbers are huge. As the 4th biggest travel agent, we're talking significant numbers. And what's interesting about this event is there's two groups of people, a group who have a real imperative and an urgent need for communication, and a group of people who do have holidays coming up in the next month, 2 months, 3 months, who we really need to talk to as a provider and a business. But we need to break them into groups to be able to handle them well in a way that gave them a good customer experience and a way for us as a business that helped us manage risk. And so on the 25th, I was actually out at a kids' party behind my local scout hut, just with friends and family. And we got this call that the Foreign and Commonwealth Office had actually changed its advice and everyone needed to come back. We were able to, as a very small group, just around a video call, not the best of environments, establish how we wanted to split up our customers. So this idea of people who are going to be traveling in the next 7 days and people who are already in resort, because they had this real urgent need for communication. Had they just lost their entire holiday? Did they need to come home? We were able to split our two cohorts and also define a communications method for each of them. So we combined changing our whole contact center so it could filter inbound to give priority to the people we thought had more urgency, but also use our contact center to start driving the same information as our agents would use out through proactive communications. Exactly the same information. Again, I'm going to stop myself talking too much, but that information also, wasn't just broadcast. In the configurable contact center world, it was actually bidirectional. So we started to gain more information about the situation to drive our business thinking and our handling of the situation. It's hugely powerful for us. And the sort of anecdotal bit to me, which really showed me the power of contact centers compared to the old world, configurable contact centers compared to the old world where they're just hard to code for. I called Tom, who I believe is hiding on this call somewhere, who was a part of my team. He was unfortunately out with his family as well. He has young children, but he did have his laptop and a 4G internet connection. And we were able to make all the changes, go back to our days and reconvene at 8 o'clock in the evening. And we got a good outcome for our customers. We got a lot of information and data for our business. And we also kept our personal lives on track, which during an incident or big events of that nature, it feels like a big win. Keeps us able to keep going. If you could move me on to the next slide, Greg, that'd be great. So instead of continuing to chat, I'm going to try and sum it up for you. So a configurable contact center for us at Love Holidays. I've kind of told you the size of the company, the size of our CS, and a example of sort of us under extreme stress. Having that configurable contact center has been a massive force multiplier. 3 engineers, have been able to deal just with so many new scenarios easily and seamlessly. It's stunning. We can tap into our existing data, we can tap into our existing systems and put them to work as quickly as we can think about it sometimes. It's absolutely incredible. And from the customer point of view, it allows consistency. It allows a level of urgency as well. So we can actually adopt or adapt, should I say, our platform depending on the context of the day, the week, or the month, to make sure customers get the right feeling out of it. And it's fundamentally changed how we think as a business. The interesting thing for me is replacing the contact center felt like the objective when we started this journey. Now it's actually enabling all of the business services to be able to communicate directly with our customers in a way that adds value to both sides. So we feel that we're only at the very, very beginning of the journey. If you could move me on to my last slide, Craig. Just before I hand you back, because I don't want to keep going, I thought it was worth noting, because I don't know if it speaks to insanity on my behalf or speaks to the credibility of Twilio, the platform that we used, but we decided to make the change at the peak of coronavirus crisis because we didn't have enough capabilities in the platforms we had. We couldn't be as flexible as we needed to with our staff, and we couldn't use information in the way we needed to. So you could read this timeline, we could talk about it later, but we did that in the middle of possibly the most demanding time for the travel industry, possibly at the highest communication peak for us as a business, with 3 engineers, a little bit of support, and we didn't miss a call. We didn't drop a message, and we actually saw very, very quickly a 20% improvement in the performance of our agents. So it was, yeah, I think it testifies to the benefits of doing this, and also the ease of getting there. Fear is in the thinking beforehand. Anyway, I'm going to hand you back to Craig at this point. He'll take us through the rest of it.
Thank you, Eugene. As advertised, a really short and snappy presentation, but now what I'm going to do is I'll move us on. Art, we've got some questions for the team. Just remind everybody in the audience, you can ask questions via the question window. We'll be monitoring that, and we'll interject. But Art, if I hand back to you, I'll post the first question, and we'll go from there.
Thanks, Craig. Eugene, thanks so much for your presentation. It's a pretty incredible story. And this element of needing to respond really quickly, I think really kind of talks to this question that we have up here right now. So, the question, when should businesses look to use tools to build their contact centers? Well, I actually want to extend on this, Eugene, and ask you that I noted on your timeline you got overwhelmed with phone calls, and there was a pretty quick strategic decision to turn the phone off and go to live chat reluctantly. But tell us a little bit more, since we're talking about when to use this. What did that management decision look like? So what signals were you getting from the system, from customers, from volumes? How were you able to present that data? Because this had to be kind of a leadership team strategic decision made quickly. Okay, yeah. Tell us a little bit more about that.
So, feels like it was 100 years ago now. The corona crisis has taken it out of us so long. Yeah. So right back at the beginning, how it became clear is for every announcement made by the government, I kind of talked about it a bit in the slide about Spain. We didn't just get people who are immediately affected. When you hear there's a problem in Italy, which is kind of where this all began for the UK, you didn't just get customers who were going to Italy in the next 2 weeks or were currently in Italy. We even had customers who had recently been to Italy trying to contact us. What happened is the real imperative changed. The communication style of our customers changed. They used to contact us when they wanted a functional transaction. They now started contacting us when they needed reassurance. Reassurance about health, reassurance about holidays. The questions just became broad. So we didn't just see the thousands of customers we have, each of them wanting to have a conversation with you. We saw the number of conversations grow exponentially. And we measure repeat rate in the contact center. No one was repeating for the same conversation. They were repeating because they had, every time they heard the news cycle, a new conversation came into their mind. It unfortunately wasn't hard to present the data for that, Art. We literally hit, you could predict, you saw my number of 4.5 years time spent in live chat. Imagine trying to do that in the call environment. We could just extrapolate it out with the growth of agents would have had to have been more than we could handle. The thing that gave us confidence to make that move to live chat, because it's a slightly less personal channel, was the ability to manipulate our data to prioritize customers. We didn't want to be asking clumsy questions. We didn't start with the maturity of being able to do natural language processing. So we needed to be able to use our data to route customers in the background. And it was convincing our CEO at the time that I could do that seamlessly and very, very quickly. That gave them the confidence to make that switch. The other compelling part was there's no real behavioral change for us. We're a Twilio customer, and actually the UI for our agents is exactly the same. So we could switch agents that had never been on chat before straight into an environment, and they could be productive.
Stuart, I want to turn to you for a second. What Eugene has described is really kind of two things. Certainly, probably more, but let me put two on the table that I want you to address. And one is this ability to have visibility, okay, into what's going on. And you know, with a number of other systems, it's like, well, we got a fixed set of dashboards and they do this, but they miss that. You know what I'm saying? And the second thing is that in a rapid response fashion, being able to really shift what the contact flows and those customer journeys look like. So there's two elements: visibility more broadly outside the contact center, and two, the ability to shift very quickly. What has Sabio seen in terms of how you've been able to apply your tools out in the marketplace to address these two?
Thanks, Art. It's a good point, and I think Eugene highlighted it really well. You know, that ability to turn on a sixpence and suddenly introduce new channels or scale new channels at incredible speed, you know, within a matter of minutes or hours, is certainly something that, you know, some of the tools that are available now, particularly, you know, some of the cloud-based technologies, the programmable technologies from partners like Twilio, allow that speed of change and that rapidity to take place. And you know, to your point on data, I think again, one of the real value adds and benefits of some of the newer technologies are the ability. I mean, if you think about what we've seen over the last decade, really, with the web and the ability to continuously refine and improve and use data to drive decisions and A/B test different scenarios and figure out what suits the customer, and then continuously drive change. Again, you know, having that API-driven technology or that programmable technology suddenly available to the contact center allows that decision to continue, you know, that change to continue across the entire customer journey. So for me, it's about web thinking applied to the contact center. It's about using data to make change and drive decisions. And then with the same mindset and the same agile processes applied to that entire journey, I think that's where we start to see really, you know, to your earlier point around design thinking, we can design the customer journey from an end to end without those really sharp demarcation points that once existed when you're handing over from one technology to another.
Yeah,
Stu, I love the fact that you threw in A/B testing, because I forgot to mention that. But this, in an agile world, and contact centers, how many times can we trial something and see the result because so many other things are changing and it takes so long to make the changes? So we can't really put an A/B test out there. So this is excellent that you mentioned that. Eugene, were you going to say something? Because David, I got another follow-up question to you on this.
I was just going to sort of jump in on Stuart's point about the ability to change and change again, because you learn from the behaviors around you. So we took voice down because it was we were overwhelmed.
Right.
On the timeline, we introduced this thing called our refunds process, which is actually a voice service. Because as soon as we switched to chat, we found customers didn't want to go through the lengthy. There's a whole structure around giving a refund in a travel environment. It's a long conversation, lots of text. It didn't work. We could see that immediately. Customers were getting frustrated. So we actually moved to having it all as a recorded experience in voice and had that live within days. And it actually took something around 250,000 phone calls over the course of its life. Don't quote me on the exact number, but I know it's north of 250,000. But it had that human feel to it. Yes, it was recorded, but we didn't use text to voice or anything along those lines. So we were able to adapt very quickly. And it's just yeah, it's
Well,
nothing.
and you know, Eugene, I think in the midst of looking for a refund, that's a very emotional kind of thing that, oh my God, I got to change my plans, and I got to get a refund, and how can I possibly get it? So, you know, I certainly see the consumer desire to, you know, interact over a voice channel to do that. So you were able to do that quickly. David, I want to toss part of this, and we're still on this question, when should businesses look to use? Um, you know, we've got an example of what has happened to many other businesses during the pandemic. Wild swings in traffic, for some industries way up, for other industries, unfortunately, way down. But also the idea that, hey, we got to shift where the agents are. So we got to move them around. So many contact center leaders have been faced with this double whammy. My workforce is all over the place. My traffic is all over the place. Talk to us about Twilio's ability to be able to serve customers in this very, very, you know, kind of dicey environment in terms of these wild swings.
Yeah, it's a great question. And I mean, again, I guess to sort of talk to what Eugene talked to, and I think I've got a lot more grey hair after the past 6 months than ever before, just by virtue of just some of the need for agility. I think, you know, this ultimately epitomizes what cloud should be. It's that ability, irrespective of location, irrespective of the environment, to be able to provide some degree of continuation. I mean, we've had customers, again, similar situations to Eugene, that have implemented web chat, one in particular in less than 22 hours, which again was a challenge at the time, but one we kind of met and subsequently helped them a great deal, particularly in their particular market, which is healthcare. But I think that, you know, the two don't have to necessarily go hand in hand. You know, we've seen a lot of examples where a proportion of traffic will be moved to Twilio to kind of ease that sort of shift across. The Twilio platform is completely browser based, so actually I think the biggest use case we saw very quickly within the first couple of weeks was just home working. I think most of our customers that moved that way had more challenge getting hold of enough laptops than they did configuring their contact center, which again I think is a pretty good accolade in that sense. I guess the other thing we've seen, by the way, is people keeping it simple. And you know, I've kind of again been in contact center world for a very long time, but you know, we do have a tendency sometimes to overcomplicate. And if we're looking to use tools, particularly when there is a crisis, it kind of prioritizes the things that we want to start with. And again, I think the beauty from a Twilio perspective is that, you know, you're safe in the knowledge that whatever you deliver tomorrow isn't set in stone, and you can iterate, exactly to Stuart's point and Eugene's point. But let's stick to what we really need to do right here, right now. Be that, you know, help with the demands, be that help with the fact that half our staff are furloughed, be that we've got a brand new channel that's, you know, kicked off all of a sudden, and then iterate thereafter. And it just becomes a nice, neat transition. I think Stuart kind of talked to that as well, around testing and so on and so forth. So, you know, that's what we see. And again, it's, our CEO said it really well about 2 months ago that, you know, clearly not dictated, but this is kind of what Twilio was made for, is a crisis like this in the world, just because of the agility.
Yeah, I mean, David, it really speaks to the idea of getting a minimum viable product out there, as opposed to, you know, a big battleship. That, you
Absolutely.
know, there's a tendency sometimes to over design, you know, in the classic waterfall model of the old days. It's just get the MVP out there and get the real world feedback and do the A/B testing. Seems to be a real consistent theme that we're seeing here in this conversation. Craig, we've got other questions to kind of put to our panelists. Let's go to the next.
Okay.
We may have spoken to some of these, but Eugene, I know you put some of the actual quantitative metrics up there. But let's see if we can get to some of those numbers again, or if there's any more that you have at your fingertips, because everyone always wants to know what's the return on investment.
So what numbers would I talk about here? So volume of agents, volume of chats. Let me actually stop waffling. I'll get to a point. So coronavirus to us has meant 12 years worth of work in 4 months, roughly. So that by work, I mean amendments, alterations, or refunds, stuff we don't normally do. We sell holidays. People go on holidays, they come back. That's our normal business. Not they buy a holiday, we chat loads, and then we give them the money back. But we've been having to take a new model. The 12 years worth of work we have had to increase our overheads to process it as a business. We've grown from, we were running at about 250 agents beforehand, and we've gone up to nearly 400. However, we have scaled the efficiency of those agents. We initially got through 20%. We've now been able to get our onboarding of agents down to days and hours rather than days and weeks. So we can respond to, should there be another incident like Spain, we could actually think, oh, we'll take on 40 more agents. So your business value is for us, Art, is twofold. We have seen productivity increases in our base business, so our agents can now do more. But it's also that adaptability. I can actually clip cost out of the business. Should things go nice and quiet now, the holiday season coming down, I can actually wind down the contact center very, very quickly, use our time and resources to focus on a different part of the customer journey for a while. But it's that the ability to process 12 years worth of work, but we didn't increase 12-fold our staff. There was definitely room for improvement in our handling of it, but the contact center was up to the task and was brilliant. So
I think that's a great way to characterize it, Eugene, is, we always look at our contact centers as the volume of work. And I say, we always look at these investments where it's like, how can we rob the bank of agent salaries and come up with something and yet still serve the same traffic or maybe increased traffic. Stu, have you seen from a Sabio's point of view, any additional ROI type benefits or any other things beyond what Eugene has cited?
Yeah, well, I just wanted to pick up on one of the points that Eugene made, actually, because, first of all, Eugene talked about scaling quickly, or all of a sudden having new starters that are coming on board and wanting to get them up to speed as quickly as possible. And that really, for me, one of the key benefits now is an increased focus on the user experience, but not just from a customer perspective, but from an agent perspective, and creating a desktop environment where it is much easier for people to navigate their way through systems. We all know that in contact centers for many years, a typical agent might take 4 or 5 different applications just to solve a single 3 or 4 minute call for a customer. And that's just not acceptable when you've got new starters coming on board and needing to get up to speed quickly. So being able to design a desktop experience that allows people to get the problem solved from a customer perspective, focus on engaging with the customer, and have the communication and the information at their fingertips to solve the customer's problem, I think is really important. And that's even more so when you now think we've got a whole bunch of agents that are sat at home on laptops with smaller bits of real estate on their screen to be able to try and communicate with customers. I think the ability to very quickly have a user-centered design for a desktop for an agent is really important, and I think we're going to see much more of that going forward.
Yeah, I mean, David, I'm going to tee up the next question for you. So Craig, if you can move us to the next question. I mean, it's unavoidable for us to we've already touched on this one, and certainly Eugene's story is an incredible testimonial to what organization, I mean, the number of Forrester customers I've talked to, they're just people like you, Eugene, that have customer service heroes out there, that it's amazing what has been done in the last, 4 months, 5 months, 6 months with the impact of the pandemic. But David, what has Twilio seen in terms of the adoption of programmability? Not just, okay, we want to be on a platform that can get our agents home. What else has been going on that really speaks to this programmability that Twilio has seen?
Yeah, again, great question. And I guess just to the last one very quickly, one of the things we see now really, really commonly is ROI measured in clicks. And again, to Stuart's point, it takes me perhaps 33 clicks to circumvent this process. It takes me 20 clicks. Each click has an associated time period with complexity, and that's really the baseline we see a lot of people using when they start to design around this desktop. I think in answer to your question there, Art, specifically, there's a lot of, and actually you touched on it at the very outset, you know, take contact tracing as a prime example. It didn't exist as a use case 6 months ago. There wasn't a need. We didn't have to en masse communicate with the whole of New York City and understand their current symptoms for something and be kind of programmatic in the way that we respond and update and inform. And I think that's really just a prime example of where programmability comes into play, because what we often see, and again, I've come from the traditional contact center world, I've come from the outsourcing world as well, is you kind of look for a cookie cutter that matches X% of your particular requirements. Either that's because you've always done it that way, or that's what you envisage the experience needs to be. You tend to then have to sacrifice something in order to match that, because you're taking something off the shelf. Whereas with programmability, you take those, you match to those. And so things that we've seen, you know, grow 2,000-fold, video. I think, you know, as a nation, as a world, we are now used to video in the same guise we are today, be that a pub quiz with our friends or family over the weekend on Zoom, or a liaison with the doctor because I've got a particular ailment and video is the easiest thing to do. People are far more accepting of video now, and all of a sudden we're seeing, you know, some really clever video case studies from utilities that are using it from a meter reading perspective, to insurers that would be looking to use it from a, you know, here's the bump on my car or the carpet that's been damaged by the dog. The challenge, actually, to a point Eugene made before, is that traditionally we buy products that do something particularly well, but they don't necessarily talk well together. Whereas, you know, the Twilio view of the world is, we don't care what the channel is. We want you to be able to handle it in exactly the same consistent manner. So if we introduce chat or video or WhatsApp or, you know, another channel that might come into the future, the programmability allows us to be consistent with that. So video definitely is one of those. Obviously, we've seen lots of home working. We've seen lots of particular need around visibility in home working, because again, I'm no longer sat at the end of a bank of desks and seeing my whole team. I need, you know, new tools at my disposal to understand how well they are and offer them support. We've seen, you know, again, desktop environments that have been tailored specifically to simplicity, and actually they're dynamic. So again, an environment where you've got a new hire that's got perhaps more information available to them versus someone that's had a slightly longer tenure, which again, you know, gives us some really interesting ROI around things like attrition all of a sudden. So there really has been a lot of use cases. And again, I mean, Eugene's is a perfect example, but we've seen that with, you know, home shopping network companies, with insurance brokers, with lots and lots and lots of healthcare, UK, Ireland, and again, you know, across the world. And that's part of the challenge, is trying to keep abreast of both.
Yeah.
Hey, Craig, let's go to the next question. I want to throw this one at Stu here. So, you know, so that's from sort of the programming, but we're responding to customers. Stu, from a Sabio perspective, we've certainly heard from Eugene how their customer behavior changed and what they needed to do to respond to that. But Stu, thinking more broadly, and Sabio engaging with a lot of Twilio Flex customers with your tools, you know, what else have you seen out there, and how has programmability helped other organizations respond to behavioral changes?
So I think, similar to what Dave was saying, really, I think we're seeing this entirely new cohort of customers that are engaging in digital channels that weren't doing it before. And these are people that were almost forced to do their shopping online, or do their banking online, or communicate with their kids or their grandkids using video and FaceTime. And even now, when they go out into the real world, they're being forced to use contactless payments. So they're kind of being forced into digital And I always think of the classic kind of technology adoption curve where you've got your innovators and your, your leaders, if you like, that are very quick to adopt, channels and the latest technologies. And at the other end of the scale, you've got your laggards and your late adopters that really may not adopt them at all unless there's some pressure to actually do so. And they're the cohort that we're seeing entering the market at the moment. And for some organizations, that can be 30, 40% of their customer base. So now they're being forced to use digital channels, and they're realizing, actually, this is great. I like it, and it works well. However, they still need a bit more comfort and confidence. So I think the safety net needs to exist underneath digital, which is the contact center, to allow those customers to carry out the transactions with confidence. And I think that's where we need to think about, and what the programmable contact center allows, is to really embed service into the website and make sure that we're able to target people that need help, let the people that don't need help carry on and do what they need to do, but make sure there's that safety net there to service people that aren't traditionally used to, to doing stuff in digital channels.
Stu, that's great. And the way that I've been phrasing this with Forrester customers is, the pandemic has created this forced digital kind of experience, both for the customer service leaders, and that as consumers have said, look, I got to get, in touch, and the use of the digital channels, so the consumers themselves have somewhat been forced to digital channels, where in the past, I would throw down the penalty flag and say, you know what, just serve customers on their channel of choice. If they want voice, give them voice. They want web chat, give them web chat. Don't push them somewhere else. But the pandemic, with these wild swings in traffic and wild swings in agent availability, has kind of forced everybody into these other channels, and the organizations have needed a platform to be able to respond. Hey, Craig, next question, please. This is rolling along. I know we're kind of coming close to the end of the hour and want to address some of the audience questions. So, Eugene, I touched upon this a little bit earlier as far as insights. That, I always find that, and I take about an inquiry once a quarter from Forrester customers. How do we get better at sharing insights? Because we're the front line in our contact centers. How do we get better at sharing these insights with the rest of the organization and provide a feedback loop for those insights get fed into the organization then reacts, responds, and notice that hotspot I had on that customer journey earlier, and the ability to rapidly make changes. How has programmable helped you get better at doing this?
I would answer it, it's taken me out of the equation to a degree and put the whole of the business into it. And that's the biggest shift. And I'll explain that slightly bizarre answer. So as we've moved to a fully programmable, customizable contact center, we have also shifted our architecture to an event-driven architecture. So when a customer starts an interaction with us by whatever channel, by whatever means, we start to push data off all the events. Loads of events. We're talking tens of thousands, hundreds of thousands of events a day, because data is interesting. We don't necessarily know the story we're looking for at the time we start pushing the data, but we push that data, push those events. So should Art, are we seeing a trend in changing behavior of our customers? Are we starting to see them wanting to talk to us or interact with us about different things? I don't have to be the one anymore that has that thought and takes that forward to the board saying, look, we're seeing this big trend in customer behavior. We need to think about changing our contact center. That data has now been democratized in our business, that everyone can very quickly build a report and see that. So yes, I can go and do it, but it's become more powerful. It's made the contact center that used to be, stepping back to the weird machine that hid in the corner of a data center. Nobody saw the data points going off it. Nobody was interested in the data points. Now the data points are front and center of our very business. For every team, whether that's our flight provider team, whether that's a CEO, and it's really massively changed because now everybody's focused on the customer journey and the customer experience.
So Stu and David, I'm going to give you guys both a shot at this one, but let's extend on that, because what Eugene talked about was becoming event-driven. And so for the geek side of us, getting down to an event-driven model is really what we've had to do here, which is really cool. But we've always had tons and tons and tons of data in our contact centers. I mean, when I worked for Avaya and managed the reporting package, one customer said, yeah, I print out the reports and I put them over here. Well, what do you do with it? Well, I print them out and put them over here. Okay, great. It's the insights. And so both Stu and David, from a Twilio point of view and a Sabio tools point of view, what else have you seen in terms of programmability, allowing organizations to sift, sort, extract, and really get to insights as opposed to that big pile of reports that we had in history?
So I guess from my perspective, I think one of the things that we're quite excited about at the moment is the ability to gather, and real-time events and incidents from whilst the call or the interaction is taking place. So, we've traditionally looked at things like speech and text analytics technology as being historical and analysing post, interaction. But the ability to do that in real time with the interaction, pick up on key bits of data or insight, and help the agent using a flexible user interface to help the agent respond to that. And it could be a next best action or a reminder to speak a compliance inquiry or a flag to a supervisor that the agent's struggling with a customer or something like that. I think those are the areas where the real-time incident generation is a real growth area that we're seeing at the moment. And again, I think that's particularly important when you've got agents working remotely, whereas traditionally in a contact center, you could put your hand up and say, I need a bit of help. You can't do that when you're at home. So having an underlying mechanism, an AI-driven mechanism to highlight areas of concern and get people involved, I think that's really exciting. So.
David, I'm going to kind of jump here to the last question and let you take the first shot at it. And back to, the whole COVID story. At some point, and as the organizations have learned about work from home models, and organizations are wrestling with what's next and how do we go back and have to design all the protocols to go back into their traditional office locations. What have you been seeing from Twilio customers and how you've been engaging with them and how programmability is helping them think that through?
Yeah, it's a great question. And we actually, funny enough, recently did some internal work around effectively entitled "What Now?" We've done it. It's been rapid. It's been successful. We've met a particular need, but what now? And I think it's back to Stuart's point. We're seeing a lot of people evaluating the data that they've gleaned during this process. A degree of that data will highlight the fact that there's a new shift in customer behavior and expectation. We've almost set out the stall and said, look, the times are really tough, but we still managed to do everything. So now all of a sudden the expectation is really high for us to have a continuation of that. But ultimately, I think what we're doing with a lot of customers is now just getting a sense check. So that works quite well. What next? How do we ensure that that continues to be successful? We're safe in the knowledge that if everyone has to be maintained from home for the next foreseeable future, that's fine, that's given. We've now got our insurance policy, that's done. What can we do to change that? And that could be around introducing some channels. It could be around introducing some sort of programmable processes around the outsides. It could be, again, to Stuart's point, I mean, I'm a bit nerdy myself. I've got a load of tech behind me. I don't have a wall board. So I don't have, visibility that I would normally have in a contact center. So what does that mean now? How can I help people? How can I train people in a remote environment? And it is just that, again, having a bit of a litmus test view of it worked, we did that, now let's look at how we can evolve that. We're also seeing a lot of people just not going back. They're not going back to their old platforms because actually they've just seen that it's a very different world and they can continue to kind of iterate for as long as they like. And we're really proud of that because that's the sort of premise behind why Twilio was born 12 years ago, was really that whole purpose. So yeah, what now is very, very, very kind of pertinent, but we're more than happy to help with that.
Hey, I'm going to insert a question from the audience here, and thanks everyone for your attendance and participation, and thanks for your questions. We are kind of coming to the top of the hour, but there was a question about some of the quote-unquote newer messaging channels. Apple Business Chat, iMessage, potentially doing things over RCS as opposed to more, I'll call it traditional SMS or traditional web chat. Eugene, let me toss it to you. Is there any thinking about engaging your customers over some of these additional messaging channels, and whether or not programmability in the platform is going to help you facilitate that? In fact, I know it will, but what you're thinking?
I get to answer you in a dismissive manner. I don't have to worry about it. So and this is why, this sounds glib, but so Twilio makes the experience for the agent consistent, no matter which channel I use. I should be using the channel that is most context relevant to the customer, to their demographic. So if that's WhatsApp, iMessage, anything you could throw at me, Art. Should I be using it? Yes, of course I should. Should the agent experience be the same on the back end? Of course it should. We don't need to mind with a configurable context that it doesn't matter. It's not a Herculean effort to bring up a new channel. We're about to launch Facebook into Twilio. We've planned a 5-day working sprint to do that, including agent change. It is making those things trivial. So I don't need to worry. I know that sounds like a strange answer. I would embrace everything because all communication is easy to do.
Well, it was a while ago they rolled out the conversational API, which basically normalized the communications across a broad range of messaging channels, so you didn't have to worry about it. Hey, folks, we're at the top of the hour, so I do believe we need to wrap up. Craig, if there's any closing comments about Sabio and what we want to do here, but this has been a great dialogue. I do want to express my thanks both to Sabio for sponsoring, and for all of you panelists, Eugene, Stu, David, I really love the interactive dialogue. So this has been awesome. But Craig, let's take us home.
Okay, well, thank you very much all for your contribution. We have taken it right to the hour, and we've still got a fair few people online. We've answered the vast majority of the questions. We will follow up on those questions that haven't been answered, so we'll do that via the email channel. I would just like to say thank you very, very much. There is a recording of this webinar. It'll be on sabiogroup.com, but as you're registered for the event, we'll send it to you anyway. And if anybody has any questions, obviously you can follow up. The contact details are on the screen now. So I'd like to thank you, Eugene. David, thank you very much. Art, thanks so much for taking us through and managing the process. And Stu, thank you very much as well. So I hope everybody has a great afternoon. Stay safe, and we'll see you soon.
Take care.
Thanks, guys.
Thank you. Take care.
Thanks.